Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for spending some time with us. I'd just like to touch on a few topics. First of all, the debates and resolutions that are going to be negotiated on this morning on the murder of George Floyd and the social protests that have come of that. I'd like to say something about the German presidency. I'd briefly like to touch on Brexit and also the coming council meeting. Hopefully very important decisions will be taken concerning the economic and social recovery for Europe. But let's take things in turn. On the initiative of the left group in the European Parliament, and this is something we're very proud of, we'll be having a debate on the assassination of George Floyd. In this debate, we will, as the left, be involved in this, and I'm very pleased that we've managed to work out a clear position of the European Parliament on this, which makes it very clear that we do not tolerate racism in any form. We also demand a critical reworking of the colonial heritage of European states that have a colonial past. We will touch on the fact that slavery should be seen as a crime against humanity, and we hope that the European Parliament will make that position its own and then be the first international institution that has taken such a position at all. And we'll express criticism of a number of measures that the US government, the Trump government, has taken in reaction to the social protests that came up because of the protests of George Floyd. We know the threats of that administration to send in the military. That will be a central part of this week's plenary session. We're very pleased as the left group that we have contributed to getting this going. There's another initiative that I'd like to mention in the context of the German presidency. Together with two NGOs, Lorry Control and Covered Europe Observatory, we've started an initiative which comprises a good 100 members of the European Parliament, where we're looking at the German presidency and calling on them to open the black box, which is the Council, and make sure that the negotiations that the heads of state and government have, the negotiations that ministers have, that we can open up those, because the minutes of these meetings have not been made public to date. We need to know what's going on. We need to know what position which member state is adopting. So these 100 MEPs together with us and the NGOs are asking for clarification of lobbying there to make sure that we have a very full and clear transparency. We have a full and clear lobby register, making clear what lobby activities are going on. We want to put a stop to sponsoring, which unfortunately has become part and parcel of all this. Big firms, let's just take an example, a car manufacturer that is sponsoring the presidency. At the same time, in the Council, there are negotiations going on about reducing CO2 emissions from cars. So that can lead to rather difficult situations, conflict of interest. We would like that to be avoided. So sponsoring, especially by private firms of presidencies, should stop. Secondly, Brexit. That was secondly. Thirdly, Brexit. In this plenary week, this is going to be a very important point, as has been in the past. We're over 6 months now we've been looking at this, and given the negotiations between the UK and the EU, so perhaps I can give you a pictorial representation. You can say that's about as much as we've achieved so far. Yesterday was a high-level conference with the President in Office of Council, the President of the Commission, Boris Johnson, David Sassoli, and following this high-level conference, we've managed to achieve this much now in the meantime. So the results on Brexit are quite clear, I think, and we're facing quite a considerable task ahead. So basically nothing tangible has been achieved through these rounds of negotiation. And what we're facing now, and this is becoming clearer and clearer, either we're going to have a poor agreement or we're going to have a hard Brexit, a hard industrial Brexit by the end of the year. And we're going to have to think about this. The member states will have to think about this, but also the sectors that are going to be hit hardest by this, the regions that are going to be hit hardest, need to have support measures sketched out to mitigate this kind of impact. And it's clear that we as the left group in the European Parliament are not going to support any agreement that at the end of the day would lead to dumping in the social sphere and the environmental sphere in terms of tax or consumer protection. This would be completely unacceptable. Also, the aspects that have become known about data protection, that we find problematic. The protection of private data is absolutely essential in these negotiations. Moving on to the upcoming council meeting, the results already been made public. There will be no result of this meeting. I think the European Union at the moment needs a bit more than that. There should be a clear signal of cooperation, of working together in solidarity to help the economy and to help to get the economy going again, and to look at the economic ramifications and social ramifications of the crisis and to mitigate those. I think it's good that the debate on subsidies is being looked at. That's an initial step to take common responsibility in financial policies. Also, apart from the specific aspects, when it comes to providing loans, and some member states are being referred to drawing down loans, we're looking at a possibility of a new state debt issue. That's something that's of great concern to me. That's something that could destabilise the Eurozone as a whole. And at the same time, providing credit lines which is linked to the European Investment Bank and the stability mechanism in the public sector is problematic. So we, as the left, by way of conclusion, we would say, obviously, we need to see a red line drawn under the Stability and Growth Pact. We need to look at the European semester and the Stability and Growth Pact and take them out if they're going to be linked to providing loans. What would you think if we'd have social criteria attached to that? Improving public services, to improve the health services, for example, or that loans should be provided to states which are actually fighting tax evasion and tax avoidance. So we want to change the ECB mandate to make sure that the ECB can provide help to member states. Of course, you need to use the markets to do that, but to avoid a future disaster, we need to have a clear mandate for the ECB, and therefore we need to change that mandate. And finally, we need to make sure that companies and the super rich manage to avoid assuming their burden of the rebuilding of Europe and social security systems. We want to see a comprehensive financial transaction tax, a strong digital tax, and a European wealth tax. Thank you very much. I'm available for any questions you might have.
Okay, so thank you, Martin. We can pass the floor to any journalist who'd like to pose a question. I see Catherine Fiore from EU Reporter has a question. Catherine, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, please. Martin, I'd like to ask, Philippe Lambert commented on the new coalition government in Ireland, which involves the Greens. I'm just wondering, given that Sinn Féin are a member of your group, are you disappointed by what you see in Ireland, because Sinn Féin did very, very well in elections? And if I may, a second question, a poor deal will hit Ireland hardest of all EU member states if there's a poor deal on Brexit. And I'm just wondering, what can you do to get the best outcome for, obviously you're thinking of the EU as a whole, but in particular for Ireland, because it will be very, very hard hit by a poor deal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those two questions. Well, I'm disappointed, of course, that Sinn Féin is not leading the government in Ireland, but that it's another coalition government. I would have liked us to have another left-led government in the EU in order to be able to exert greater influence, particularly with regard to political developments in the EU. So I regret that the Greens took this approach. Because I think that this is going to lead to stagnation also in Irish politics. and also we've been having discussions with our colleagues from Sinn Féin. We will analyse the situation, but we think that the situation that has made Sinn Féin so strong in the election campaign, but also in society, and there need to be responses to the issues they've been addressing. And I hope for the colleagues from Sinn Féin that they will be in a better position, but that they will have the leeway in order to be able to be strong, and they have our full support. Now, on the agreement, you're right, a bad deal or no deal will affect different regions differently, and Ireland will be one of the regions most affected in the EU, and so for that reason it's something which is particularly addressed in the Irish protocol, etc., is dealing specifically with the Irish situation. This was always a priority for us. The peace process in Northern Ireland needs to be guaranteed. That's been our fundamental position in the negotiations up until now, and we've always wanted to support the all-Ireland economy and its maintenance, and we want to make sure that there's no strangling of the economy, but rather that there is support for the all-Ireland economy. And so we'll have to look at, be stressing the implementation of the withdrawal agreement and the Irish protocol. And that is something that we as a group have been really putting in the forefront. It's something that we fully support, but we do have to negotiate, and we have to make sure that there can't be a reduction in European standards, that an agreement which deals with the future trade arrangements with the UK, because that would be to the detriment not only of Ireland but to all EU member states. That's one point. And then if there isn't a common ground that can be found, which seems to be the case at the moment, then we have to make sure that the regions which are most affected, particularly Ireland, get support from the EU, so that there's not a negative impact on the economy. And that is going to be one of the political positions that we will be putting forward, and it has been our position.
Thank you, Martin. Any follow-ups or further questions? I don't see any other journalists. Catherine, you have a follow-up, please? Go ahead.
So just a question. You mentioned in terms of the future and economic plans for Europe about more fairer taxation, and I'm just wondering, do you feel that you've got a broad coalition across the Parliament to really address this issue of fair taxation and the avoidance of tax advantageous tax agreements that basically siphon off profits from some countries into others? So I'm just wondering if you feel there's strong support within the Parliament for that. Certainly it was something that came up during the parliamentary elections, and I think most parties most groups were supportive of it in some shape or form. So do you think that going forward there will be a strong coalition that can actually do something about it this time?
Well, I've made clear the position of my group, and of course we want a tax policy which focuses on fairness and which looks at the issue of distribution, something which has happened over decades. It's been from the bottom to the top, and now it needs to change direction. And so for that reason we're saying that we need to have a comprehensive financial transaction tax, a digital tax, and also a wealth tax for the super rich in EU member states. And I think that for some of these demands there is a possibility of getting support from other groups, and perhaps there can be a majority in the EP, particularly with regard to the taxation of digital undertakings. There seems to be a change of direction there. But some people are now saying that this is something that they can support. And on the financial transaction tax, it's a question of how this is going to be done, whether it's just on shares or whether it's a comprehensive FTT. We wanted to cover derivatives and things like that, so that it is truly comprehensive and covers all of the trade on the financial markets. And I think we'll have to wait and see what the positions of the other groups are. But I think that there will be at least partial support for this. And when we're talking about distribution and justice, it is important that we have the left in the Parliament, because we're the ones constantly putting forward these arguments. And I think it is important that we have this voice putting forward these demands.
Okay. I think we don't have any further questions, and that answers your question, Catherine. Okay, well then, just to say that our plenary focus documents is available at the back of the room for those in the actual Parliament, and it'll be on our site and social media, or is already today. And as usual, don't hesitate to get in touch if you need any questions or clarifications on our priorities. Thanks to the interpreters, and thanks, Martin.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone.